Orson Welles. That's better. For my complete thoughts on Orson Welles, you can always click here. Otherwise, here are the rankings. Definitively. Now, I should say that I did watch everything complete with Orson Welles' name on it as director, but a couple of these movies don't really qualify. Mr. Arkadin and Don Quixote. Neither have complete cuts at all. Don Quixote was never even meant to be finished, and Mr. Arkadin was just pulled away from Welles, and he was never able to actually complete his own cut. But the comprehensive version on the Criterion release is pretty close, probably, to what Orson Welles would have done, but it's obviously missing his imprint, especially towards the end, so it doesn't count. So it's 11 films, ranked definitively. Let's go. Number 11 is The Immortal Story. Now, should this be considered a feature film? It's only about 55 minutes long. What is the barrier for a feature film? Is it 50 minutes? Is it 40? Is it 70? I don't know. I do know that this was supposed to be one half of a larger anthology film, both films based on the writings of the source author, but okay, I'm just going to include it because this is my ranking. It's pretty good. It's very atypical Welles. It actually feels more like an Ingmar Bergman movie than an Orson Welles movie. It's very slow and contemplative with a heavy emphasis on conversations with heavy meaning. But at the same time, it is very focused on how stories are built, which is very Orson Welles. It's an interesting film. It is very much an art house film. I don't hate it by any measure. I do think it's a pretty good and interesting look at storytelling and Welles using color. I just never really feel the need to ever really revisit it. It's just, it's pretty good, but not as interesting as the rest of his films. Number 10 is The Lady from Shanghai. Now, this movie is all style, and I wouldn't say no substance, but it's pretty much all style. And it's something I really get into. It feels like Welles took on a challenge of saying, can I make a noir? Sure, here's a noir. Made it and he walked off. Of course, that's never the actual story. Welles, outside of one film, kind of labored over everything and just like crafted and pissed off everyone while he was doing it. My only real problem with this film, it's like the mystery is fun, the acting is fun, Welles himself gives a fun performance. It's far from his best, but he has a fun performance. He's playing up against his real-life wife, Rita Hayworth, whose hair he cut and dyed out of, to change her image for the film for some reason. Apparently it didn't help the film commercially. And I really like it. I kind of love it. My only problem is in the third act. Yes, the third act includes the funhouse mirror, and that's great, but it's like 2 minutes, and most of the third act is a courtroom drama, and courtroom dramas kind of just kill things for me in most films. They are either deeply unbelievable or deeply boring. And they always end up kind of feeling like they're just grinding gears, not really moving things forward. I feel that in the third act's use of the courtroom drama here. Otherwise, this movie is just really, really fun. Number 9 is F for Fake. It's pretty, but is it art? And that's ultimately the question at the heart of Orson Welles' most playful film. It's a documentary ostensibly about an art forger, but it becomes this freewheeling video essay about just fakery in general. Orson Welles had a big obsession with magic. He famously turned his role in Casino Royale as Le Chiffre into a showcase for his own ability to do close-up magic. And this film is just a magic trick. Everything that Chris Nolan did in The Prestige, but with much heavier tones, Orson Welles does here, and just completely playfully. He pulls the rug out from you completely towards the end. essentially admitting that he's just lying to you and creating a magic trick of his own, weaving stories that are real or unreal, and it doesn't matter, and what is the line between just something that is very nice to look at and something that is art. And I don't know where this really falls on the line. I just know I really, really enjoy it. It's really fun, and it's very much, it's something of a doodle on his part. He obviously worked very, very hard on it, so it's not like he just threw it together in an afternoon or anything, but it feels like a doodle. It's just throw it together and put it out there. And it's ground zero for Orson Welles was a fun filmmaker. He was far less stodgy than people want to give him credit for. He was fun, and F for Fake is just proof of that. Number 8 is Orson Welles' version of Macbeth. Welles wanted to bring Shakespeare to the masses, and he failed. The masses never cared. But you know what? He imbued his love of Shakespeare and his love of experimentation in cinema to great effect here. In the same year that Alfred Hitchcock made Rope, a movie famous for having 10-minute long takes, Welles did the same thing here. There is a 10-minute long take of Shakespearean dialogue leading up to the murder of King Duncan that is kind of awe-inspiring. It does that dollying back and forth to capture different interesting compositions for 10 minutes straight as actors just belt out Shakespearean dialogue and thick Scottish brogues. It's really fun to watch, but it's not all long takes. He is willing to use any tool he has to help the movie forward, and so he uses a lot of editing and montage to create subjective perspectives on the events, especially with Macbeth seeing the ghost at dinner. It's just a very fun and gothic and horror-tinged take on Macbeth, probably the one Shakespeare story that most easily cottons to horror storytelling. And it's just further proof that Orson Welles was just not only really good at what he did, but he was really inventive, and he was actually quite playful. He's trying all these sorts of different things just to get individual moments across, and it works really, really well. It's good stuff. Next is The Trial, Orson Welles' adaptation of Franz Kafka's novel. And I kind of just love movies that follow the logic of dreams. It's one of the reasons why I love David Lynch so much. And Welles' adaptation of Kafka's novel follows the logic of a dream. People appear in scenes, our main character just kind of moves from one weird set piece to another. The transition feels incomplete, but within the context of a dream, it just makes sense. It's like, I'm suddenly here now and I'm doing it. And it's the perfect way to capture the absurdity of the life that Kafka described, the process of trying to clear one's name. It's full of this beautiful black and white imagery. You've got this great central performance by Anthony Perkins, who, just feels completely lost the entire time. Welles himself has a fun little supporting performance as a lawyer. And, it's interesting in that almost entirely the film could just be completely rearranged, scenes just put randomly, and it would still make the same amount of sense because it's supposed to be nonsense. It's Lewis Carroll filtered through Central European bureaucracy. And it's this weird dream to just navigate, and Welles expertly drives us through. And I kind of love it. It's weird. In some ways it's hard to take because it's so weird, but I just get into it. I get on that wavelength and I'm just along with the ride. It's great. Number 6 is The Stranger. It was really a director for hire job, but he did everything that he normally did. He went in and he completely rewrote the script, and he made it entirely his own, but he still managed to make the film on time and within budget. And it was a modest financial success. It proved, at least in my eyes, that Welles could have operated within the studio system, given a certain amount of freedom. But he hated it. He hated working in the studio system, so he always just branched off to do his independent thing. And you know what? I wouldn't give up his independent movies for a world where he became another Otto Preminger. The Stranger itself is just a really good thriller with heavy World War II and Holocaust elements running through it. The story of a Nazi hiding out in Connecticut and who has gotten himself to the point where he is betrothed to the daughter of a Supreme Court justice. It is this tightly wound thriller where Edward G. Robinson gets to play a detective, and it's a butting of heads, it's a cat and mouse game, and it's just really well built. It's really fun, and it just has that extra layer of real world quality, which helps ground it just a bit more. It's not his best film by any measure, but it proves that if he had had the patience and if he had found studio executives who understood how to, work with him, and you fund him and you just kind of let him do his thing, then he would have probably had a prolific career in America, in Hollywood. But he didn't. So the rest is history. Number 5 is Magnificent Ambersons. Now, if I refuse to include Mr. Arkaden because Orson Welles didn't get final cut on that, should I include The Magnificent Ambersons, which he also didn't get final cut on, and includes an ending filmed by someone else? It doesn't matter. You're not my supervisor. I'm going to include it anyway. What's interesting about The Magnificent Ambersons is that it works so well. It's extremely obvious that the first major section, probably the first 2/3, is the purest in terms of what Orson Welles was trying to do. It is the most complete. It has the longest shots. A lot of those shots are still broken up in violation of Welles's original vision, but you can just tell in terms of the different sections of the film, the first 2/3 are the purest him. And it's the final third where most of the cutting has happened. It kind of rushes through things just to get to a conclusion. And yet, it still works really well because the underlying footage is so good and the performances are so good. It's kind of amazing how well this movie works considering the state it's in. It probably shouldn't work as well as it does, but it does. This story of a family kind of facing irrelevance as the world goes on, as time marches on, and the source of their wealth gets displaced by other things, mostly represented by a car. It's kind of this beautiful, heartfelt bit of nostalgia for a world that Welles himself never even knew, but just kind of grew up with tales with. The Belle Epoque is just that period that he idolized as a period that he'll never get back. And that nostalgia for something you can never have is very key in all of Welles's work. So even though he didn't quite finish this, and I'm always kind of fingers crossed that the original cut gets found, not happening, this is still just very good, if compromised, stuff from Welles. Number 4 is Othello. Now, in terms of chaotic and protracted production processes, Orson Welles' Othello probably takes the cake. It took him about 3 years to film. He would run off and do acting jobs. The Third Man was one of those acting jobs. And he would come back with some money, and he would get people to, show up again for another few days of filming before he would head off again to get another job. And this would go on for 3 years. And he came out with a shockingly cohesive Shakespeare adaptation. Once again, he adapts Shakespeare in the hopes of box office success, and it failed him. He did not meet box office success. He did meet artistic success, though. And the challenges of his production, where he never had enough money to do anything he wanted, forced him to experiment in completely different ways, from using shadow puppets to dubbing everyone himself to just filming the backs of people's heads because they weren't actually there, to, setting a scene in a bathhouse. So because they didn't have their costumes yet, so he just put everyone in towels and had them play out the scene. And at the same time, it is this very immediate and faithful adaptation of Othello that cuts down the text down to its bare minimum and plays it out cinematically. For all of Welles's love of Shakespeare, he was unafraid of actually adapting to the cinematic medium. And that didn't mean being Kenneth Branagh and slavishly faithful to the text. That meant finding what was vital in the text, preserving that, and then getting rid of everything else in order to adapt to the actual new medium. And it works very, very well. It works great. This is just a great film. It's angry and scary and immediate, and it just works exceedingly well. And just the fact that the backstory is so chaotic is just makes the end result all the more impressive. This movie's great. Number 3 is Touch of Evil. Now, this was famously torn apart by the studio, by Universal, upon its initial release. Welles wrote a very impassioned 58-page memo about what they had done wrong, and then several decades later, Walter Murch was able to largely reconstruct the original vision as best as possible based on that memo. And that reconstructed version is great. It is this lurid noir, just full of awful people and the handful of good people who have to make moral choices in order to navigate the noirish setting. And it's full of fun characters. Orson Welles just chews the scenery as the evil detective in the middle of it all. And it's just, it really is just kind of pure noir fun in its most lurid form that the 50s could offer. Things have gotten more lurid since, but this was the 50s. And it's kind of, again, a testament to Welles and his ability to actually work within systems. This was a studio film. He got hired by Universal to make it, but Universal just cast him out into the cold. They just recut his film without his involvement. And no one cares about the other cuts. They only care about the reconstructed. And there's a good reason for that. It is easily the best version. So, if you're gonna hire someone like a Welles to make a movie, you let him make the movie. It's like you curtail his excesses early, not late. You don't wait for him to spend all of your money and come up with a cut and then say, okay, I'm gonna rescue this in editing. Maybe you can do that, but most likely with someone like a Welles, you're not gonna be able to. So yes, this movie is just, it's fun, it's surprisingly touching in weird ways, and it looks fantastic, and I love it. It's just a great film. Number 2 is the granddaddy of them all, Citizen Kane. Yeah, it's just number 2. This movie is a lightning bolt of talent. And at the same time, it's actually a surprisingly involving story and a surprisingly intelligent look at how people kind of exist in silos, about how little we can actually know each other, especially through something like media. It is the anti-biopic, where there is no center to the character, where he is just his external events, where the actual depths of his soul are hidden from the world. And, we have a hint, the famous rosebud, but ultimately it is just a hint. What does it actually mean? Does it mean that he loved his mother? Does it mean that he just wishes to go back to Colorado? Does it mean that he just needed 5 more minutes in the snow? What does it mean? I'm not entirely sure, but all the money in the world couldn't buy Kane Rosebud, even though he already had it. He'd collected so much, he kind of probably didn't even know he had it. And, the fans of this movie are just some of the biggest detriments to the movie's reputation, because they go on and on and on about how it is this technical marvel. And it really is. It is all of the lessons of the sound era up to that point congealed into one film, while Wells does kind of anything he can to make the film look interesting. And, a lot of this stuff has real meaning, especially around power dynamics, with the angles of his shots. But ultimately, what it is a young guy with an overinflated ego just trying to be fun. That's the secret to this. It's like he's just trying to have a good time with his movie. So, like, the shot of, the giant window being revealed to be a giant window as Orson Welles goes back, yes, there's a certain element of, the diminishing of the character within the scene, but it's also just a fun shot. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think people, especially its fans, focus too much on the technical, which distracts from the fact that it is actually a very human story, told in this very unusual way, and it does invite emotional investment as a man searches for meaning, and us on the outside being unable to actually reach him. I find it actually a surprisingly touching film and incredibly worth your time. So no, it's not going to change your life. You're not going to be William Friedkin, who sees this movie and has his life changed, but it is a great film that should entertain you. Number 1 on my list is Chimes at Midnight. No, this is not some sort of hot take. I just genuinely love this film. I think it is the pinnacle of Orson Welles' directed work. It is everything he loves. It is his best central performance. It is him at his most experimental. It is just a great time at the movies, and it's shockingly touching. Taking the story of Sir John Falstaff from the Henriade, a series of 5 plays, and shoving it all into one, while making Sir John Falstaff into this image of merry old England, an England that never really was, but is always alive in our hearts, is this marvelous story of time passing us by. It, again, much like the Magnificent Ambersons, much like Citizen Kane, it's a story about nostalgia for a time that probably never was. And Welles completely owns the role of Falstaff with the eye towards that, where he is a creature from a past that perhaps never existed, and he has to watch as his vibrancy dies out. Of course, the only reason anyone ever really talks about this movie is because of the Battle of Baden Hill, which is towards the end, and it is another example of Welles being this experimental filmmaker making the most out of nothing. He never had more than a few dozen people at a time, yet he still makes this subjective battle sequence that feels so much bigger than it is, entirely attributed through editing, which kind of became the standard for how filmmakers approached battle scenes. You compare something like Stanley Kubrick's approach to battle scenes in Spartacus, very wide shots, very clear geography, to Orson Welles' attempt to find a way around the fact that he had no money. And suddenly it's like modern battle scenes kind of make a bit more sense. Martin Scorsese made a very explicit homage to this at the beginning of Gangs of New York, but it is a fun technical exercise, but to me, it's one of the least important parts of the film. I love the film as a whole for what it is, about this man who sees himself out of time, and it's a beautiful, heartbreaking tale, and I absolutely love it. So that's it. That's the definitive ranking of all of Orson Welles' films, and it's a good time at the movies. What you'll find in Orson Welles is a playful, fun director who just wanted everyone to love Shakespeare, you know? And people are never going to get to that point, but you know what? You can discover him for the playful, fun director and experimental director that he truly was.